Hello everybody, this is Ben Mizrahi again, and today we will talk about British Israel. I know I already did a short and I have to say rather unplanned introduction into the topic, but I'm leaving the topic of God aside for the moment because of requests by some of my friends to make a special video about British Israel. I already did the Hebrew version of the video. As far as I know, this is the only video in Hebrew that deals specifically with the topic of British Israel and the basic proofs for the theory of British Israel. So if you have Israeli friends that you want to share the British Israel with them, you can always direct them to my Hebrew video about the topic. Whose link I will put in the description. So British Israel is a topic that I believed since I converted to Christianity about 5 years ago. At some point God literally woke me up every night to do research about Israel all night long and gave me supernatural strength to continue my day the following morning. When I have work, when I have studies the following days. So this topic really blessed me, really influenced my theology, and I do feel blessed when I talk about it every time. Even though for me, unlike some people, it's not the major topic. People should forget we are the church. We are the true people of God. Not a particular race, but there is still an importance in ethnic and racial divisions, even within the church. God says that we are all equal in Christ, Galatians 3. There is no basis whatsoever for racism. We were all created in the image of God. We are all one species, not one race. That's an important distinction. We are actually three distinct races according to the Bible. But the Bible also forbids race mixing. For example, I think it was in Numbers 25, the story of Pinchas ben Eliezer, when Pinchas basically killed a Simeonite household leader that committed race mixing with the Midianites and stopped a plague basically. Given by God because of race mixing. We see that in the story in Genesis 11, the story of the Tower of Babel. So when God created us and differentiated us into different nations, so we wouldn't be united because we are always evil. So united, we can always do evil to ourselves and towards the world in general. So the Bible is clearly against race mixing, even though we are all equal. Against miscegenation, I believe it's called in English. So we must live by the principle of equal by separate, meaning if we talk to white people, we must tolerate non-whites, we must respect them, we must see them as our brothers in Christ if they are believers. We must never mix with them. We must keep our blood pure, and so are the other races. The Asians and blacks, basically, and the mixed, and the races created by race mixing, like Arabs and Turks. So anyway, that's the short introduction, which was 4 times longer than the Hebrew version, by the way. So anyway, so what is British Israel? British Israel is basically the theory which I believe it was revealed to me by the Holy Spirit to be true. I am not the only one holds to this theory, by the way. This theory was very common in the 19th century. There are still many people that holds to it. We'll talk about them later, like Peter Salemi from the British Israel Church of God, which I really recommend his videos about the topic. Stephen M. Collins, who wrote a very detailed book about the topic. I will put the links to both the books of Peter Salemi and the book of Stephen Collins in the description. They are both available as PDF files for free. Of course, many other people who are not dealing specifically with British Israel, but do accept it as a fact. So it is not a theory I came out with out of the blue. It's a theory that was there since before the 19th century, but by the 19th century it was already a common belief in Britain and the United States. So British Israel is basically the theory that is an offshoot of the two houses theology. The two houses theology is basically a doctrine that separates the house of Israel and the house of Judah. In the Bible, we see a clear distinction between the southern kingdom of Judah, or the house of Judah, or what we know today as the Jews, and the house of Israel, or the northern kingdom of Israel. We see they have different roles in the plan of God. We see they represent two different sides of God. Israel represents race, and Judah represents the grace of God. This is why the Messiah came to Judah. While Israel, the house of Israel, still mostly preserved their racial makeup since the Israelite time. That's we must not base on the Jews when we talk about the Israelites, because they mixed both racially and culturally. So yeah, anyway, so the mainstream, as we should put it, two-house theology basically said that the house of Judah is the Jews and the house of Israel in the church. Now, I believe this interpretation to be false. We must remember that the church is the true chosen people anyway, in the eyes of God. I do believe in what is called supersessionism. I do believe that the house of Israel should be the leaders of the church, meaning our pastors should be only of Israelite origin. So British Israel theory says that the house of Israel is not the church, the house of Israel is the 10 tribes, which is another, by the way, another main offshoot of the two-house theology. Those who disagree that it is the church almost always says they are the 10 tribes. The main difference is where we identify the 10 tribes. Now, many people say that the 10 tribes assimilated into the surrounding people in Mesopotamia or assimilated back into the Jews, and we will see shortly that this notion is false. The Bible actually says that this notion is false and not true. The Jews comprised only the house of Judah. They have very minor elements from the 10 tribes. So other people say that 10 tribes are located in Afghanistan or in Japan or in Peru or in Nigeria. All of them are false. I believe British Israel is basically the belief that the 10 tribes are the ancestors of the modern day Celtic and Germanic people, meaning the people of the Sprachraum, Germany, Switzerland, and Austria, the German-speaking world, of the Nordic countries and Scandinavia, of the Low Countries, Northern France, and of course, and most importantly, the British Islands. We believe that Anglo-Saxon people are the descendants of the tribes of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh, Britain being Ephraim and the US being Manasseh. We will see why shortly. And since Joseph has the birthright, we believe that Britain and the United States are destined to be the premier nations of the Western world. They were predestined by God to be the premier nations of the modern world. First Britain and then the United States as superpowers. And so this is the theory, basically. And now let's see the proofs for it. So, of course, I listed 5 major streams of proofs. Of course, I will not list all the possible proofs. Other people literally wrote volumes about it. I will also need the 1 or 2 most important proofs from each stream of proofs. So the 4 streams are basically the Bible, which is of course the most important proof, history, secular history as we know it, combined with the Bible of course, genetics, and linguistics, basically the study of languages. So let's begin. So I'll begin with the Bible. Now, most of the quotations from the Bible are taken from a website called Brit Am. This website is maintained by a guy called Yair Davidi, who is sadly not a Christian, is an Orthodox Jew, an ultra-Orthodox Jew, who believes in British Israel. And I want to actually mention this site in particular because one of the first most libellous claims that British Israel opponents throw against it, the theory is that we are anti-Semitic. So, of course, this is bollocks. There are some, of course, like in any movement, anti-Semitic elements. I personally believe that Judaism is the most anti-Semitic religion on planet Earth, since it literally tries to control every aspect of the Jew. Basically, it treats Jews as childlike that are prone to disobey God. Therefore, I believe Judaism is the most anti-Semitic religion on the planet. But in this case, this argument is false. We are not anti-Semitic. As we say, we have Jewish supporters. Of course, I'm of Jewish extraction myself. The former secretary of the Canadian British Israel Federation was Jewish. That's at least true. 3 persons who are Jewish. Stephen M. Collins, the most celebrated author of British Israel theory, who dedicated his life to prove British Israel, wrote an extensive biblical defense on the Jews, on White Arabian Judah, and a natural ally of the West, which I think it's somewhat debatable if they are natural allies of the West. I do believe the state of Israel is a natural ally of the Western world, not the Jews as a nation specifically. In fact, we can see many negative things the Jewish nation is doing in the West. Most often Orthodox and leftist Jews. So, yeah. Anyway, so the biblical proof. The most striking proof is, of course, Genesis 49. Okay. Genesis 49 is the single, I think, most important chapter when we're discussing about the 10 lost tribes, because it definitely proves that the 10 lost tribes did not assimilate into any nation, because this prophecy is for the last days, and it cannot be the Jews. It cannot be only the Jews, because the prophecies are basically contradictory of each other. They only make sense if all the tribes, it only makes sense if each tribe is its own nation or nations. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of contradictory prophecies that makes no sense whatsoever. So let's begin. Then Jacob, I read in verse 1, okay, and verse 2 only. You can read the prophecies for the specific tribes after that. I would encourage you to do it because they help us specify, locate the specific tribes in the West, and I will try to do it in the next few chapters when I will film them. I'm not sure when. I will try to do it. Anyway, then Jacob called for his sons and said, "Gather around so I can tell you what will happen to you in the days to come. Assemble and listen, sons of Jacob, listen to your father Israel." So we see here Jacob blessing Israel, his sons, and telling them what will happen to their descendants in the end of the world, in the days to come. This is the NIV translation, the days to come. But I think that's not the best translation there is. In Hebrew, it definitely says in the end of times. So, yeah. Anyway, that's the most important proof. You can read the prophecy for yourself, and I greatly encourage you to do so. Of course, I will always encourage you to read all the Bible for yourself and formulate your own opinion, because that's what we are called to do, because we are all priests as believers, as Luther said, the priesthood of all believers. So it is our duty to interpret the Bible for ourselves and to read it for ourselves. So yeah, we are the priesthood of all believers, and of course this is one chapter out of the entire Bible, but I do encourage you, if you want to research the 10 tribes, for me that's the chapter to start with any discussion about the 10 tribes. Now, other important things that I want to read to you is actually Isaiah 49:6. Now, just to give you the context, Isaiah 49 speaks about Jesus, the second coming of Jesus, when he will gather the Israelites, and I believe based on Ezekiel 37, which is another chapter, by the way, that proves the 10 lost tribes are not the Jews, because during the exile, when they supposedly assimilated to the Jews, God shows Ezekiel that the Jews and the house of Judah will reunite at the end of time, only after the second coming of Jesus. Anyway, Isaiah 49 speaks about Jesus. Okay. Just a moment, I had a problem with one of my links. Okay, that problem is solved. So it speaks about Jesus, but it also reveals the location of the Israelites in between. So I read verse 1 to verse 6 of Isaiah 49, and of course, as usual, I will encourage you to read the entire chapter for yourself. This is a beautiful chapter. Listen to me, you islands. Hear this, you distant nations. Before I was born, the Lord called me. For my mother's womb, he has spoken my name. So, of course, this is Jesus. He made my mouth like a sharpened sword. In the shadow of his land, he hid me. He made me into a polished arrow and concealed me in his quiver. He said to me, "You are my servant, Israel, in whom I will display my splendor." But I said, "I have labored in vain. I have spent my strength for nothing at all. Yet what is due to me is the Lord's end, and my reward is with God. And now the Lord said, He who formed me in the womb to be his servant, to bring Jacob back to him and gather Israel to himself, meaning he talks about Jesus. He's the one that is the servant of God. Of course, he's the Son of God and God the Son. But in this context, he's the servant of God the Father. And he's tasked with gathering the Israelites, forming the political union of the different Israelite nations, and gather Israel to himself. For I am honored in the eyes of the Lord, and my God has been my strength. He said, It is too small a thing for you to be my servant, to restore the tribes of Jacob. This is all the 12 tribes here. And bring back those of Israel I have kept. This is the 10 tribes here. I will also make you a light to the Gentile, and that my salvation may reach to the ends of the earth. So we see that the Israelites will be located to the ends of the earth. Now, what we have identified Joseph, the firstborn of the Israelites, so the type of the Israel, we identified him with the Anglo-Saxon race, the Anglo-Saxon people. Now, where do we find the Anglo-Saxon people today? We found them in the United States and Canada, in the extreme west of the world. We find them in Australia and New Zealand, the extreme east and the southeast. We found them, and we found the Dutch, whom I believe are the tribes of Zebulun and Asher, in South Africa, in the extreme south. And of course, in the extreme north, we have Norway, which I believe is the tribe of Naphtali, Finland, which I believe is the tribe of Issachar, Iceland, which I believe is the tribe of Benjamin, and Greenland, which belongs to Denmark, which I believe is the tribe of Dan. So we do find the nations that I said that British Israel identifies Israelites in the end of the earth. So this is another biblical proof for the location of the 10 tribes. Okay, now in Jeremiah 31, this gives us another important clue, which I want to combine with Isaiah 49. So we'll go to Jeremiah 31. This is, by the way, the same chapter that predicts the coming of the New Covenant, the New Testament. So I do greatly encourage you to read it, especially if you want to preach it to Jews or other people who believes only in the Old Testament, because here actually even the name of the New Covenant and the New Testament is mentioned explicitly in verse 30. But we will read the two other verses, verses 9 and 10. Oh, even better, I will start with verse 1 because it will give us the context. At that times declared the Lord, meaning after the second coming. This is a direct continuation of Jeremiah 30. I will be the God of all the families of Israel, and they will be my people. This is what the Lord says. The people who survived the sword, who survived Jacob's trouble and the great persecution, will find favor in the wilderness. I will come to give rest to Israel. The Lord appeared to us in the past, saying, I have loved you with an everlasting love. I have drawn you with unfailing kindness. I will build you up again, and you, virgin Israel, will be rebuilt. Again you will take up your timbrels and go out to dance with the joyful. Again you will plant vineyards on the hills of Samaria. The farmers will plant them and enjoy their fruits. There will be a day when watchmen cry out on the hills of Ephraim, Come, let us go up to Zion, to the Lord our God. Now, those are actually called Samaria, as we will see. These are the kingdom of Israel. which we will see later, migrated to northwestern Europe. Ephraim, of course, is Britain in the United States, and of course Canada and Australia and New Zealand. Zion is the city of Jerusalem. This is what the Lord says, "Sing with joy for Jacob, shout for the foremost of the nations. Make your praises heard and say, Lord, save your people, the remnant of Israel. See, I will bring them from the land of the north." Now, what did it say is in the north? Denmark and Norway and northern Canada and of course Alaska. And the Israelite pocket that might have survived in Russia, of course. And gather them from the ends of the earth. Again, we see that phrase, the ends of the earth. Among them will be the blind and the lame, expectant mothers and women in labor. A great throng will return. They will come with weeping. They will pray as I bring them back to their allotted lands. I will lead them beside streams of water on a level path when they will not stumble. Because I am Israel's father and Ephraim is my firstborn son. So now we specifically talk about Ephraim. Hear the word of the Lord, you nations. Proclaim it in the distant coastlands. Here who scattered Israel will gather them and will watch over the flock like shepherd. Okay. So, what do we have here? First, we have a wrong translation in the NIV. How surprising. In the original Hebrew, what a term in verse 10, distant coastland in the Hebrew is actually islands afar, meaning distant islands. Now, if we combine the ends of the earth with islands and with Greek geography, Greek geographical thinking, it actually makes a clear sense, a clear map on where we should search for the Israelites, the 10 tribes of Israel. Because you see, the Greeks thought, back in the days of Isaiah, they still really thought the earth is flat. They discovered the earth is round, about 300 BC. We are talking about just before the exile of Israel, so about the 8th century BC. So they thought the earth is flat. And of course they didn't discover America, so they thought and they didn't discover Iceland, by the way. Iceland was discovered in the early Middle Ages. So they thought that the British Islands were the far west of the world. And the interesting thing is that they didn't know about the Gulf of Finland as well. So they thought Sweden and what we know today, Sweden and Norway, are actually islands as well. So these verses point us specifically to the British Islands and to Scandinavia. So I think this is a clear proof of that we should search for the lost 10 tribes of Israel in those locations. And of course, there are many such verses like Isaiah 24:15, the name of the Lord God of Israel in the isles of the sea. The isles shall wait for his law. That's Isaiah 42:4. Now who waits for God's law? The Israelites, the 10 tribes. Okay. And many such verses, and of course many other prophecies. For example, Isaiah 18. Many people claim it describes America, the United States geography perfectly. The Dolmens This is a road sign of the Israelites traveling, as predicted in Jeremiah 31 verse 25. Set ye up waymarks, make the eye eaps, set an hour towards the highway, even the way which to wentest. Sorry, that's KJV. Turn again, O Virgin of Israel, turn again to these thy cities. Okay, now set up thy waymarks. Now in Hebrew you can also translate it, set yourself up stone monuments, dolmens, as we see in sites like Stone Age and the Hill of and Gilgal Rephaim in the Golanites in Israel. Of course, the dolmens were modeled after the biblical sites of Gilgal next to Jericho and the four other Gilgals. So there are dolmens all over Western Europe, not only in Stone Age. Of course, Israel was, where was it? Dominating world power, it predicts so. In Numbers 24:17, he shall pour the water out of his buckets, and his seed shall be in many waters. We talks about the Israelites here. This is part of the prophecy of Bileam about the Israelites. And his king shall be higher than Agag, the king of the Amalekites, and his kingdom shall be exalted. They should be the world powers, the Israelites. The next verse, Numbers 24:8, God brought him forth out of Egypt. He had, as it were, the strength of a unicorn, or the strength of a bull. He shall eat up the nations, his enemies, and shall break their bones, and pierce them through with his arrows. Now no nation was ever able to defeat the Germanic and Celtic people and conquer them. They always defeated in the end all of their enemies. So we have a clear sign here, meaning they have the supremacy. Of course, agricultural plenty. For example, in Genesis 27, when God, I think he blesses Isaac here, verse Genesis 27:28. Therefore, God give thee of the dew of heaven, and the fatness of the earth, and the plenty of corn and wine. Now, that's certainly not Israel, which almost has no rain. But we do have in Europe agricultural plenty, like is described. Deuteronomy 33:13, when Moses blesses each of the tribes except Simeon, this is part of the blessing for Joseph. And of Joseph he said, Blessed of the Lord be his land, for the precious things of heaven, for the dew and for the deep that coucheth beneath. Okay, so Joseph is blessed with both agricultural prosperity and mineral resources. Now, where do we find that? In the British Islands, and of course in many British colonies like Canada. So, if we see all the nations that have agricultural surpluses, we will see that many of them are nations that British Israel theorists identify as Israelites. And those specifically are France, the United States, Australia, South Africa, and Israel. And of course, South Africa under apartheid, not now, which is basically a third world state since blacks came to rule over it. We talk about apartheid and its history later, and why it was actually a blessing to both whites and blacks in South Africa. Anyway, so this was the biblical stream. Now we get to the historical stream, which is basically what history says. So, according to history, the 10 lost tribes were carried off to Assyria in several waves. The most famous and central wave was in 722 BC, when the Assyrians conquered the Israelite capital, Samaria, when it's conquered by Tiglath-Pileser III. Anyway, so what happened? Since then, secular history says that the Israelite tribes disappeared off from history. That's false, however, as we shall see. Now, it is a known fact that any archaeologist will tell you that, every archaeologist that researched that period and area, that the Assyrian called the kingdom of Israel the house of Omri. It was named after Omri, the second king of Israel and the father of the more famous king Ahab. Why he was so famous, nobody knows. The Bible gives the impression he was actually a very minor king. So we don't really know, but that's the name that's stuck in the Assyrian records, the house of Omri, or Bet Umriah. Now in Assyrian, the O and the K can sometimes be interchangeable. So the house of Omri was also called the house of Qumri, or the house Qumriah. Now, less than 20 years after the exile of the Israelites in 722 BC, we see in the region where the Israelites were exiled to, according to the Bible, the appearance of a new people called the Cimmerians, that destroyed, among others, the first Armenian kingdom and did a lot of damage to the Assyrian Empire. In fact, it had a very major role in the fall of the Assyrian Empire eventually. And from the area of Armenia, they split into two parts. One part kept the original name and migrated west. The Greeks came to call them the Keltoi, or Celts. In Wales, for example, in the local language in Welsh, they still call themselves the Cymri or the Cymri. So one part became the Celt, the other part migrated north through the Caucasus mountain. This is described in the Deuterocanonical book called For Esdras, when the Israelites wanted to get out of Assyria before they will lose their law and their customs, and migrate to a land that no human has stepped in before, called Arzaret, and it took them a year and a half to get there. So they migrated and became known as the Scythians. Those are the people that settled in the area eventually from the south of Ukraine and Moldova and northern Romania, all the way until Siberia and western China. That's a huge geographical area. And of course, not all of the tribes there were Israelites, but most of them were. And all secular historians of ancient East Asia and the ancient Germanic people agree that the Scythians are the ancestors of the modern day Germanic people, meaning the German people, the Anglo-Saxons, the people in the Low Countries, the Dutch, specifically in the Luxembourgs and the Belgians, the people of Scandinavia and Iceland and the Faroe Islands. And sorry if I forgot somebody, but we see that. Of course, we have a lot of more detail about this, which you can read both in the booklet of Peter Salemi, which is only 148 pages long, or if you want even more historical information, you can go directly to the book of Stephen M. Collins. This is the shorter books, only 600 something pages, called The Lost 10 Tribes of Israel. Found. I will put links to both books in PDF formats in the description. so you won't have to search much for them. And we will move to the genetic strands. Now, in order to determine by DNA if the lost European people, German Celtic people, are the lost tribes or are candidates at least, we must determine if they have genetic connection to the people we know for sure are descendants from the 12 tribes of Israel, namely the Jews. To avoid controversy, because I know there is some controversy about the ancestry of Ashkenazi Jews. Now this is bollocks. Khazars comprise, according to research, only 10 to 15% of all Ashkenazi Jewish genetics. That's the percentage of the Khazar element in Ashkenazi Jewish genetics. But just to avoid that controversy, I will actually relate to you the DNA of Sephardic Jews, which are universally recognized as Jews even by those ascribed to the Khazarian theory. So depending of which study you take, most Sephardim have haplogroup J. Of course, this is to be expected, and this is true to all Jews. So 30 to 40% have J1 or J2, which is common in the Levant among non-Arab groups, and in most of Southern Europe, like Southern Italy, Central Italy, Greece, Spain, and Portugal. So that is to be expected, and that actually doesn't reveal us anything useful, except that Jews are not even close to Arabs, as many people think, and it actually disqualifies Arabs for being Ishmaelites, but that's topic for another video. So this part does not reveal to us anything useful, but we must remember we talk about 30 to 40% of the Jewish people of Sephardic Jews, meaning 60 to 70% of Sephardic Jews are still unaccounted for. This is a majority by plurality, not an absolute majority. So next, another 30% of Sephardic Jews have haplogroup R1b. Now R1b is extremely common in Portugal and Spain as well, but which of course either Portugal and Spain also hosted, according to British Israel researchers, large Israelite colonies since the beginning. But anyway, more importantly, R1b can be found, according to Wikipedia, mostly in, can you guess it? Well, you probably cannot guess it, so I will break it to you. Mostly in Western European, specifically among 57.8% of the population. Then among Northwestern European, among 55.8% of the population, and 42.9% of the population of Central European people. Now, if we describe it further, it comprised roughly 85% of all the Celtic people. About 85% of all Celtic people have R1b, haplogroup. So they share this with a very large element of Sephardic Jews. Could be even a tie between those who have J haplogroup and those who have R1b haplogroup among Sephardic Jews. So that actually can specifically puts the Celts as a very promising candidates to being part of the lost 10 tribes of Israel. Now let us continue. About 11.5% of the Sephardic Jews have haplogroup Y, which is actually found in Northern Europe. Okay, so let us be more specific. According to Wikipedia, this is found mainly among the Darginian people in the Caucasus in Russia. Okay. Interestingly enough, it is, let's see, in 39% of the Danish people, in 18% or 26%, depends on the county, can get up to 38% of the English people, 17% of Estonians. Of course, I'm trying to find the Swedish. Oh, here, about 52 of the Swedes, could be reach up to 60% of the Swedish population of Kristianstad and Kalmar. Okay. And 37 to 45% of Norwegian. Sorry, 33% in Bergen. And 30% in Western Norway to 45% of the Norwegian. So haplogroup I is clearly common in Northern Europe. So that helps us to put the Northern European nations, meaning the nation of Scandinavia, Finland, Iceland, and the Faroe Islands, and of course many Englishmen as likely candidates to be part of the lost 10 tribes of Israel. Now, a small amount of them, of Sephardic Jews, have haplogroup 1RA. Now, all of those, by the way, are Y-DNA haplogroups if you want to search for them. Now, this haplogroup is found mostly in Poland, in about 50% of the population. And I always say, unlike many other British Israel theorists, that Poland is very large Israelite population. And this basically proves my claim. But it's also very common in some areas in central Norway and in the Finnish-speaking parts of Russia and in Eastern Germany. So it also helps to put the German people, the Poles, and the Finnish people as likely candidates to be Israelites. And the most interesting of all, 90% of the Sephardic Jews have E1. Where was I? E1B1B. Now, why this is interesting? Because haplogroup E is an haplogroup that is not to have started in the Middle East, but then moved to Sub-Saharan Africa, except E1B1, which is known to actually have moved to Europe and is found only in Europe today. So, only in Europe and Western Asia, meaning it moved around the general area where it started instead of migrating to Sub-Saharan Africa. So now it's particularly common in Southern Europe and the Balkans, in area of large Sephardic settlements, and in southern France. So that helps us also put the French people as likely candidates to be Israelites. The data, by the way, is taken from an article called The Race of Sephardic Jews by the Ethnic Genome Project. I will put the link to that in the description. Now we get to the fourth strand, which I will not specify much about it, because linguistics is a topic many people, including myself, still have great difficulties to understand. So, but I will try to make it as simple as possible. So I have a Welsh article here from Bitam, Britam, sorry, an English language article from Britam about the Welsh language and its connection to both Hebrew and ancient Egyptian. I will not talk about this as I don't speak any Welsh, unfortunately. I really want to learn the language. And if you want, by the way, there is a Welsh course on Duolingo. It will get you probably to basic level like all the Duolingo courses I tried. But it's free and it's worth the effort and it's nice and you will learn something new. But I will move to the other thing I have. Oh, and I will put the link in the description anyway. And I will put the link of the description to the article I actually read, which is not really an article, it's a doctorate work of about 169 pages long about the phonological similarities, meaning the similarities in sound between Hebrew and the Germanic languages. Now, the main theory is that many rules that are peculiar to the Germanic languages can be explained by Hebrew. For example, the Grimm's law, which is about sound changes between Hebrew and Germanic. You can read about it in Wikipedia because it's very technical law, but it's very helpful in Germanic linguistics. It says that it can be explained by Hebrew. It says that Werner's law, which is another update of Grimm's law, can be explained by Hebrew. Don't try to search about Werner's law unless you're really into linguistics. Even I cannot understand this law. It says that geminations, meaning having two similar consonants, one after another, in words like apple, or what other example? Okay, let's stay with apple and the two P's. It says that it can also explain by the rules of Hebrew, especially in the West Germanic languages, meaning German, Dutch, Frisian, and English, basically, and Scots, and on. It says that the umlaut can be explained by Hebrew, and the only conclusion is that there was a significant influx of Hebrew people, speaking people, into Indo-European lands back in the times when Biblical Hebrew was spoken, because this rule applies specifically to Biblical Hebrew, except for some aspects of High German, which can be explained by Ashkenazi Hebrew. So I will put you the link to that work in the description, which is the work, by the way, is called Phonological Similarities in Germanic and Hebrew. It was written by Terry Marvin Blodgett and was approved by the University of Utah. Okay, and it gave Terry and Blodgett a doctorate degree in German. So, yeah, I'll put you it all in the description. And until next time when I will return to the subject, tschüss, auf Wiedersehen.